Hello, my name is Lee Brandt. I am a developer advocate with Okta. Today we're going to talk about Docker Swarm. Now, Swarm allows you to manage clusters of machines that are going to host your containers. So what we're going to do is going to make sure that you have Docker Community Edition installed, or if you have access to Enterprise Edition, it should work just fine. To make sure that you have it installed, just Docker V should be running a version similar to this. I'm running Docker 17.12. So if you need to get it, you can just go to Docker, get Docker, and Community Edition. As well as we'll be using VirtualBox for our virtualization software. Docker Machine, which comes with Docker, is the thing that's going to be creating the virtual machines for us. We're going to be using the VirtualBox driver to create those machines. So to see if I have any Docker machines already created, I can just do Docker Machine ls, which lists out our virtual machines that we have going. We can see we don't have any here. Let's go ahead and create a couple. For each one of these, I'm going to bend space-time because getting an IP address for each one of these machines can take a few minutes, and rather than having you just sit there and wait and watch with me, I'll just kind of fold that up so you don't have to watch it. So, to create a new Docker virtual machine, it's just Docker Machine create, and we'll create, our first one we'll call M1 for Manager 1. We can see that we're using the VirtualBox driver here, and I'm just calling him M1 for a simple name for Manager 1. So when I create it, we'll see this spit out, and again, I'll go ahead and bend space-time here so you don't have to wait and watch. Okay, so once that's done, you should see Docker up and running down here near the bottom, and we can SSH into that machine by using Docker Machine. But first, let's create one more virtual machine for this cluster. So we'll just do another Docker machine, and this time we'll call it Worker1. Same thing, I'll go ahead and bend space-time here so you don't have to wait for this. Alright, and as we can see, Docker's up and running on our worker node as well now. So, to verify that we have both of these up and running, we can just do our Docker Machine ls again, and we'll see that we have two virtual machines, one called M1, one called Worker1. One of them has an IP address of 99.100, the other .99.101, and we're going to go ahead and copy this IP address because we're going to need it here in just a minute. What we're going to do is we're going to SSH into that M1 machine, and we can use Docker Machine to do that too fairly easily. It's just Docker Machine, SSH, and M1. That'll drop us right into M1, and we can go ahead and we'll initialize the swarm in here by doing Docker Swarm init, but I also want to give it an address, so it's advertise addr, and it needs two dashes in front of that. So we're going to advertise the address of the 192.168.99.100 of our manager node up here. Since this is going to be initializing the node and managing it, it's also going to be the leader of our node. And so we want it to advertise that 99.100 address so the other machines can join the swarm to it. So once we do this, it should take just a second, and we should see that it initialized the swarm initialized, the current node, this key for this ID for this node is now the manager of the node. To join a worker to this, run this following command. So we'll go ahead and copy this command. And if we want to join another manager, we can run Docker Swarm join token manager, and we'll get the same command, but it will be for joining a manager to this swarm. So we want to join the worker node that we created before, this W1 worker node. We want to join it to the swarm. So we'll exit out of this machine, and we'll go ahead and SSH into the worker node, Docker Machine SSH into W1, and we'll just run that command that we just copied off of Manager 1. And it should say that it joined the node. So, if I want to verify this, we'll look at it in the worker first. To verify what's going on with any Docker machine, you can run Docker info. And there'll be a bunch of information about this Docker node, but the one we care about is down here in this swarm section. We can see that the swarm is active, The node for this machine is this ID here. It's not a manager, and its IP address is 99.100. Its manager's address is 99.100, port 2377, but this node's is 99.101. So if I want to see the same thing on the other machine, I just go ahead and SSH back into it, into manager 1, and I can run the same command, docker info, and I can see that the swarm is active. This node, there's the key for this node. It is a manager. The cluster ID is this. There's one manager, 2 nodes. The orchestration is happening here. All this information you can get about the swarm is going on here. Manager addresses, if there was more than one address manager, you would see all the addresses for all of them. This one's node address is 99.100, and the manager address is 99.100 on port 2377, which is the default port for Docker Swarm. So now I'm going to go ahead and start a container. The first thing I'm going to start on this container is a thing called Visualizer. Now it's a sample that comes from Docker. I'm going to go ahead and show you the GitHub address here. This is just under Docker samples in GitHub. It's called the Docker Swarm Visualizer. So we're going to go ahead and run this by running the command down here. So it's just this command right here. So we'll go ahead and cut and paste that out here, and we'll run that command inside of M1. So we're in Docker M1 here. So we'll run this, and it couldn't find the visualizer image locally, so it's going to go ahead and pull it down from Docker Hub. So this is going to take just a few minutes. And once it's downloaded and complete, it will tell us that this thing is running at port 8080, and it's mapped to port 8080 on the host. So if it's mapped to port 8080 on the host, then we should be able to go to 192.168.99.100 on port 8080, and we should be able to see the visualizer once it's completely finished extracting over here. So all is done, and it should be up and running. So if I run this now, I should see my Docker visualizer. Now we see that we've got M1 and W1 as a worker and as a manager on the swarm. So this is going to help us visualize the swarm. And these are basically the container buckets. So our containers will show up there once we start running them on there. So I'm going to go ahead and start up a service. Services are basically clusters of containers. So I'm going to go ahead and start up a service with Nginx. And so in order to do this, I'm going to go ahead and start up a service based on Nginx. The way that I do that is I do a Docker service create. I'm going to give it a name called web, just something simple. I'm going to publish a port here. Publish port 80 to port 80 on TCP. Okay, and then I'm going to base it off the Nginx latest image. And when I do that, when I run that, you'll see a box here with a red light on it start showing up. This is our service. This is one of the containers in the service. The service actually has one container in it right now, and it's red because it's still starting up. Now this M1 node obviously doesn't have Nginx latest image on it, so it's going to have to go and pull it from Docker Hub. So once it's done, we'll see this light turn green, and now the service is up and running. To see what's going on with the service, we just do Docker service list, and we'll see we've got this. The ID of this service is this little key here. The name of it is web. That's what we named it. It's in replicated mode, which means it can be replicated. Right now we have one of one replica running. I expected one to be running, and one is running. It's based off the Nginx latest image, and I do have ports 8080 on TCP, port 80 published to the host on TCP. So that just means that we should be able to get to that localhost, actually 192.168.100 on port 80, and we should see the Nginx image running, and it is. So getting back to the visualizer, here's where the really super unicorn magic starts to happen. if I want 5 instances of this container running on this in this service, the way that I do that is just docker service scale, and it's called web, and I want 5 of them. So we're going to tell Docker to take the service, scale it. The service is called web, and I want 5 of them. And we'll see that this one starts up immediately because the Nginx image was already there on M1. But over here, worker 1 didn't have the Nginx latest image, so it's going to have to pull it down from Docker Hub, which means these are going to take a few minutes longer to get running. Now, once they're running, we'll see that it's waiting a couple of seconds to make sure that everything's set up and running stably. So if I want to see Docker service again, now we can see that there are 5 of those 5 replicas running. So I wanted 5 of them, there are 5 of them running. Now, to scale it back, it's just the same way. I just scale it and I just give it a number that I want it to be at. 3. I'm going to cut down 2 of them and leave us with just 3 of those containers running. Now they all, when I go to 192.168.99.100 and I go to that, it's actually load balancing across all of these. So scaling it up is very easy as well. Now we can see I've got 16 instances of this thing running. If you ever want to get rid of something, the best practice is to scale it down to 0 first. So we'll do docker service scale web to 0, and it will get rid of all of those for us. Now I still have the Docker service there. There just aren't anything. There aren't any replicas running. So the service is still there, and I don't have to create the service again. I can just scale it back up if I want to. Scale it back up to 3, and there'll be 3 instances of it running. So that's Docker Swarm. I highly recommend putting the visualizer on your manager node when you start messing around with it. Makes it super easy to watch what's going on and learn about what's happening within Docker Swarm. You can also go to the Docker Swarm documentation by just searching for Docker Swarm, and you'll see the Swarm Mode Overview documentation. And I've got some stylizing here on there, so you'll see it white, but all the information that you need about how Swarm Mode works and how to get started with Swarm Mode you can get from here. Again, my name's Lee Brandt, and thanks for watching my video.